Yeah, unfortunately.
Sherry is, I know that.
Yeah. You think she is?
Yeah, she's yeah.
I haven't seen her stick her nose out of the door of her house for about 5 days.
Just doing stuff in the house. Yeah, on the computer getting ready probably.
I imagine. Now I saw her Saturday last week.
Yeah, there's not many. I've been
How about you?
every quarter of the year in the state of Wyoming.
Chuck water.
Bummer, but you ran into her there.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you don't want to.
I'm right there by her house every morning doing chores.
Started earlier than we did.
Try to make enough noise to keep her awake.
Make sure she knows that you're out there.
Yeah.
What are we?
He says we're gonna get out of here by noon.
Wouldn't doubt it. Tomorrow will be your tug of war.
You might get a text in
I don't think there's anything else that's
That contentious, right? Right.
forget the cord.
Yes, sir.
Looks like you got your buttons done all right.
Those vitamin does not go really well with my toothpaste.
Oh, no. Oh. Yeah, I can see that. You know what? I've left my book outside.
To go.
We got to see the number.
For breakfast.
Be right back.
I'm still full.
You're still yeah.
That was actually the better. I mean, I wasn't impressed with the chicken fried steak.
You know, for $19,
Yeah.
that's not bad for prime ribs.
No, I
Them too.
a hell of a piece of meat.
Yeah.
Chicken
I
fried was 17.
believe,
Yeah, exactly. $2
you know, it's hard to tell on our schedule, but
Have you ever had the chicken fry at the Albany? down
don't
here?
think because we got
It's,
so much
it's
time
hand,
in our
hand
hands
beat.
today. We're probably not gonna, I'm not gonna buzz it through, you know, I'm just gonna play it as time will allow, probably. So if we do, yeah, we'll just kick these
Yeah, Little
two.
America, I mean.
You wanna go here
Little
instead of
America,
here
Wyoming.
first?
On
in
the other
case our
side of the
time
state.
is-
They used to
You
have a
have to
hell
leave
of a
at
restaurant. I
11
mean,
No,
it
I've
was.
never eaten there.
You gotta be there at 11,
They used to have like a grand
Okay.
piano
so you're gonna leave at 11.
Or did his
table.
So if we're through that, you know,
Well, from
and I
Green
probably
River
won't
would
have to,
all
but I'll
go.
look
Yeah,
at
I
it.
mean, then they
Schedule.
shut it
See,
down.
but I will kick
Now
that
they have
around for
some
year
sort of
number
fast food
1 and
joint
2
in
up
there.
here.
Oh, really?
It's not the same.
I ate it at a
We
place
need
in
to,
Green
for
River
sure.
that had
Yep. Anything else that, on the agenda that you see, anything?
I'm gonna make an announcement that,
I won't be around then, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't get out west too often, but
We may have different.
When did you go off as county commissioner? When was your 4 years?
January.
January.
Yeah.
So you were
so
4
I've
years.
just been out a few months. So.
Yeah. Okay, doke.
So we have through the Select Water Commission.
had either.
John, good?
Items.
Did you sleep good?
Yeah, I did. I went to bed early.
Ha, did you?
Yeah,
I
it
didn't.
was before 10.
John,
You wanted to watch the football.
I goofed around. I shouldn't have. I didn't do anything. I just goofed around.
I'm like,
we had a nice supper, that's a nice restaurant.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
nice kind of. How bad?
What you doing, boss?
What did you
Get over the
Busy
trauma
as
of
nothing.
watching San Diego State kick the crap out of us.
Wednesday
No,
night.
I agree. I agree.
No, I never got over
As
it.
classy as he is, he
No,
didn't say nothing.
but I expected it, so I didn't really have the trauma.
Yeah, it's
Wild.
You're a good fan. Yeah, I guess I gotta be crazy, dedicated one of the two.
yeah. Well, we've all been there. Where you can just pull those words back and they left my mouth.
Only
I
one
thought maybe the
time
same
in that
thing.
commissioner
It wasn't bad at all.
I don't think we got a long meeting here, do you?
redoing a project that we
Good and yourself?
cost attack.
Got a lot of snow over your way?
They're in piles.
In piles.
We've got glaciers.
These things, dictionary,
Burning more hay than you want to then, huh?
only have on
Oh, that's
construction
nice.
amendments
You know,
one here.
at home a little more than usual, but no, my cows have
Any
to go work
project-
for a living all winter.
I guess, is there any
Feed them out
project
for their
update
protein supplement.
Hey, go like this, you got a hanger.
we should look at?
Yeah,
There's been enough wind.
I hope you tell me if I had one too.
Yeah.
There's nothing more disgusting than the
Snot
guy
hanging-
running.
snot
A
hanging out.
booger hanging out of your nose.
Yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes.
When everything's covered up, learn how to dig for fall.
Yeah, mine weren't happy with
Well, we
me.
were just talking
We
chicken
just
fried
got done
steak.
doing combining corn and
recommending
we
the
got that
Albany
big snow and I got the fences built right behind the combine. We kicked them out there and there was that much snow on the ground, they stood there and
Well, I
bawled
didn't have
at
it
me. They
last night, I
wanted to
saved
fit.
myself for,
Well, mine
real
give up.
chicken.
yeah, if I've gotta do
It's
it.
interesting
That wasn't a real chicken fried last night. The gravy was.
Are we on air?
any other vehicles running around, they just pay no attention to. But boy, when that feed truck
Go camping on
With that, I'll say good morning first.
or a couple of years ago.
Beautiful day in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
This is a love note.
I want to welcome everyone to our meeting today. With that said, I'll ask for a roll call.
Larry Suker, Chairman.
Here,
Kellen Lancaster, Vice Chairman.
here.
Mike Purcell, Secretary. I'm here. Gerald Geis. Here. Clinton Glick.
excused.
Ron Cayley.
Here.
Mark Cott.
Here.
Sheridan Little.
Here.
Rodney Wagner.
Here.
Bill Yankee.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is recognition of members present to establish a quorum.
Just did. That's what we just did.
Oh, okay. audience introductions. We'll start over on the far end of the table over here with audience.
Glenn Moniz, Senate District 10, Albany County.
John Eklund, House District 10. It's Eastern Laramie County and part of Goshen County.
Lisa and Selmy Dalton, Senate District 12 in Sweetwater County, Rock Springs.
Dan Larson, House District 25 in Powell area.
Rod Wagner, Wyoming Water Development Commissioner, District 1.
Bill Yankee, Water Development Commissioner, Division 3.
Sheridan Little, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Water Division 2.
Larry Suker, Water Development Commissioner 2.
Gerald Geis, Water Development Committee Number 3, Bighorn Basin of Fremont County.
Mike Purcell, I'm the at-large member. I represent the entire state.
Thank God.
Mark Cott, District 4. Ron Cayley, Commissioner, District 1.
Andrew Coleman, Attorney General's Office.
Nancy Kastner, Water Development Office.
Jody Pavlika, Water Development Office.
Keith Clary, Water Development Office.
Steve Wolf, State Engineer's Office.
Kurt Lawrence, Water Development Office.
Jason Mead, Water Development Office.
David Collins, Funding and Improvement Service District in Gillette.
Mark Hines with Dowell. Brennan Tillman with the City of Riverton.
Mitch Hottenberg, part of the Water Engineer's Office. Steve Wilsack with Bell. Greg Kerr, University of Wyoming Office of Water Programs.
Jason Kelly, Wyoming Water Development Office.
Tony Rutherford, Water Development Office.
Colin Boston with Dow.
Frank Strong with Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities.
Mabel Jones with Water Development Office.
Mike Robinson, Water Development Office.
I think Brandon.
Brandon Gebhardt, Water Development.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
better include you. Thank you with that. What we have is approval of minutes, the next item of business, and I would like to ask that the November 15th, 2019 executive session be left out of the approval of minutes.
That is correct.
Thank you. So if someone wants to make a motion on that,
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Second.
been moved by Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Geis. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next item of business is we have item number 6, and that's closeout memos.
Mr. Chairman,
And before that, you have a handout, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Jason handed out a new agenda for tomorrow's Select Water Committee meeting. The changes to the agenda, excuse me, were a couple of actions that require Select Water Committee action, and those were included in the new agenda that was distributed.
Our closeout memos is Osage Water, is that right?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman, and I've got Keith Clary with our office to present the closeout.
Mr. Chairman, this is the Osage Water Master Plan Level 1 study that's started in 2018, and it's for the sponsor was Osage Water District. The authorizing legislation was in the 2018 session for an appropriation of $190,000. The contractor, the consultant was Jorgensen Associates, PC. The contract amount was $180,460. The final contract amount was $178,617.30. The contract savings amount was $1,842.70. This Level 1 master plan was conducted from 2018 until the final report, which came out in July of 2019. The Osage Water District has a Madison well that flows, and the water flows into the tank and then gravity feeds over to the Osage, town of Osage unincorporated. The findings from the study are that the current sole water source, the Madison Aquifer Well Number 4, requires installation of a chlorine gas system. And there's also an existing Madison Well Number 3, which is not connected to the system, nor is it owned by the district. It's owned by Black Hills Power and Light, and that's one that they're looking at as a potential redundant water supply source. It's also a flowing Madison well. Other than that, there's some other things that are needed in the system, including a new epoxy coating for the tank, and connection of possibly of this well, number 3, to the system is aging. It was put in the 1950s by Black Hills Power and Light, and the infrastructure needs some pretty significant upgrades. The following cost estimates were included in the 2019 Osage Water Level 1. The alternate number 1 was upgrade the existing distribution piping for a cost of $935,000, which is not eligible for funding underneath the Water Development Commission. Also, upgrade or include well number 3 as an approved source. Those costs can range from $335,000 up to $617,000, depending on where the pipeline from that well would actually go and where it would connect into the system. Epoxy coating of the existing tank for a cost of $95,000 is alternative number 3. Number 4 is upgrade the metering system for $813,000, and that is another one that's not eligible underneath WWDC funding, ineligible part of the projects. Upgrade the SCADA system and controls for a cost of $88,000. There is an alternative number 6 for drilling and constructing a new Madison well, and that cost would be $1,465,000, and connecting the well to the system would be an additional $240,000. Could be eligible as a level 2 test well. Alternative number 7 is upgrade the chlorine gas detection system and alarm. There was no public hearing for this particular project. There was a public report in April of 2019 in the town of Osage. The report and the executive summaries are both available online and under the Water Development Commission website under project reports. The Water Development Office recommendation is that the Osage Water District has not applied for additional WWDC funding at this time, but they intend to apply sometime in the future for the selected alternatives. The office recommends proceeding to the next level of project development upon submittal of an appropriate funding application by the sponsor. And then there's a Water Development Commission proposed motion there. So, any questions?
I just bring the board up. There's only what participants? How many is there? There are 35 there? Yeah, that would be on this new water system that'd be entitled to the upgrades. How many residences?
There's about 206 people currently in Osage, and there's 125 taps within the system and 20 taps outside the system. So a total of 145 taps.
Questions on the Osage closeout for Keith?
Mr. Chairman, I move acceptance of the Osage Water Master Plan Level 1 Study Project Report as being complete, and further, the WWDC makes the following findings relative to this project. That the Commission recommend proceeding to the next level of project development on the submittal of an appropriate
Moved by Commissioner Purcell, seconded by Commissioner Geis. I guess if there isn't any questions, we will do a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Keith. Next item of business is item 6, construction amendments. Tab E. And it looks like Brandon's got that one, right?
That is
Brandon?
correct, Mr. Chairman. This is a project that was bid last month, about a month ago on December 5th. The low bid for the project came in above the budgeted amount. So this request is for Water Development Account 1 contingency funds to cover the overrun of costs. The low bid for the project came in at $785,947.78. And that was over the budget, so the request is for $318,000 from the contingency account. And if you look at the table on the bottom of page 1, that kind of details all the funding sources that are used for this project. And if you were to do the math, our portion of the project, our grant portion of the project, the percentage of the total project is about 56%. So it's well under our cap on that. The development office's recommendation is to use $195,000 from the Account 1 Sponsors Contingency Fund.
Any questions by the commission? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the additional funding for this project.
Mr. Chairman, I would move this project with the additional funding added on.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Yonke to approve this project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Chairman? Where is the Pine View District?
Mr. Chairman, I had to ask the same question this morning. It is north of Gillette, about 10 miles north of the city of Gillette. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Purcell, if you'd have done your homework and read, it is in there. I had to catch it this morning myself.
And then out of you.
Okay, well, maybe we'll get some glasses, or better ones, right?
Yeah.
I need some too. All right, with that, we'll go on to item number 7, and that's planning contracts in tab F.
Mr. Chairman, the first item under planning contracts is a task order for the Fontenelle project with the Bureau of Reclamation. I know that Tony Rutherford loves public speaking, so I'm going to let him describe this project.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Select Water Committee. What you have before you is task...
Excuse me, you might want to say your name or state your name and
Yes, sir. Tony Rutherford. I'm a project manager with the Dam and Reservoir Division down here in the basement.
For the record, we know you, but
Problem.
I get it from Katie all the time, so I'm going to pass them on.
The wife says I'm not good at following orders, so appreciate it.
The important part of that is down in the basement.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're the people that walk through here during the meetings all the time. So. What you have before you is a task order with the Bureau of Reclamation. This is a contract with both Provo and the Technical Service Center in Denver. It is what we consider the next step in what was originally 2015 Governor's Water Strategy Initiative for the Fontenelle Dam and Outworks Infrastructure Completion Project. This contract is a two-phased contract, the way we asked them to set this up. The first step in this being a risk assessment. The risk assessment piece of this is a $140,000 phase. to be initiated upon approval by the commission and the Select Water Committee, with a time frame to be wrapped up hopefully later this summer, maybe the early fall. The deliverable from this would be a decision document and technical report of findings summarizing the baseline risk estimates and new risk estimates resulting from reoperation of the reservoir. So if you recall back to our closeout memo from the feasibility study that we completed on the Fontenelle, I'm going to call it the Fontenelle Riprap project because that's easier than the long name. Towards the end of that project, the Bureau of Reclamation brought up the idea that if Wyoming were to contract for that lower portion of Fontenelle space and use that water for curtailment, Colorado River curtailment mitigation, basically an infrequent use, there was potential for lowering that pool and using that water without needing riprap on the entirety of the face. So what this first step does is provides funding for the Technical Service Center to do the analysis to determine the threshold on the frequency and duration that we could lower that pool in a extreme drought condition and leave that upstream face exposed. If in that analysis the Bureau decides that armoring is necessary, Phase 2 is the actual design of the riprap. Phase 2 would not be initiated unless it's warranted from the Phase 1 investigation. So the Phase 2 piece of this would be initiated at the completion of Phase 1 with a schedule to be completed in the fall of 2022. And the deliverable from this would be final design construction drawings ready for bid. Jason and I had quite a bit of back and forth with the Bureau on this contract, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know we have some new commission members here since we probably talked about Fontenelle, but we would respectfully request your favorable consideration on this contract so we can keep moving forward with this project.
It's a quick question, Tony. Is there any participation by the Bureau on this project, funding-wise, or no
Mr.
funding?
Chair, no, sir.
Okay.
There was a bill passed through Congress a couple of years ago that authorized the Bureau to work with the state on this project, and language in that bill detailed that the state of Wyoming would fund the effort. The money for this has already been appropriated and approved by the legislature. We appropriated $750,000 in 2018 for this effort, and the request here is for $550,000 of that.
Mr. Chairman, how many acre feet would this add to the use we would have in Fontenelle for drought mitigation?
Mr. Chair, Representative Eklund, that bottom pool is about 80,000 acre feet. Fontenelle as a whole is about 345,000 acre feet. Of that 345,000 acre feet, the state of Wyoming has under contract 120,000. Of that 120,000, we have approximately 50,000 acre feet subcontracted. There's about another 140,000 of active capacity available for contract that the state has first right of refusal on, above the riprap elevation.
Well, I guess I would just comment, it's like having an extra dam in Wyoming if we can get this done. And probably fairly cheap since it would just be riprap. And I think it probably requires less, that would be the other question, does this require less permitting and mitigation with the BLM? You're doing some, I'm just wondering if in an existing dam to change how much water you're going to take out of it. Does that go through fairly smoothly, or do we have the 15 years of haggling to get it done?
Mr. Chair, Representative Eklund, we do still have to go through permitting.
Okay.
Until we have this analysis completed, we don't know what the proposed action is, so we can't initiate NEPA. So that would be the next step prior to construction that I failed to mention. We would have to come back and ask for more money to complete that effort as well. I think we would all like to think that it would be simple, but it's NEPA in the future, so.
Answer your question, Representative Eklund?
Mr. Chairman, a question. I am assuming by what you are saying that if this project's completed, the Bureau would like to place a condition on it that it only be used in the event of drought? Because they're in fact seeking minimal drought. They understand that it's going to be drawn down in a drought, but it isn't a pool of water where we could market it necessarily to potential users?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Purcell, no, sir. It is, yeah, the agreement or the current conversation is that infrequent, extreme drought type use. I would add that since Fontenelle was completed in 1964 and then rehabbed extensively in 1965, there has not been any use of that 350,000 acre feet that exists in that pool other than flood protection and power generation.
Mr. Chairman, so basically this is an insurance policy against curtailment.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Purcell, yes, sir.
Answer that question. I had just one more other quick comment. With the increase in the water storage, is there an area that we could use that for generation? Could there be a generator added to the element to develop some electricity off of it or not?
Mr. Chair, there's currently power generation at the site. The existing turbine that's in place is not designed to generate power below the existing riprap level.
Right, but could there be one added in the future someday? Due to the fact that there could be more water flow through the system. Couldn't be,
Mr. Chair, I suppose there could be, but I'm not sure what that would entail.
Mr. Chairman, I would guess because of the infrequent and hopefully never need to use this, the math wouldn't work out for additional generation because we're not going to be releasing that water unless we are in fact in dire straits. So you're not going to have a steady flow that's typically needed for more hydropower.
Mr. Chair, if I might add one piece to this that Jason just reminded me. When we completed the feasibility study, the cost estimates from that, if you recall, there were two construction alternatives that were recommended. One being placement of armoring in the wet with a full reservoir or partially full reservoir to avoid potential environmental concerns and issues and hopefully have a simpler permitting process. The other being drawing the reservoir down in a more traditional construction and placing the armoring in the dry at about half the cost. The other piece of this that I failed to mention in the risk analysis and constructability review by the Bureau would take a look at whether or not we could, if we need to, in the future, draw that pool down and need armoring, can we place it then and save, basically spend half the money to place the armoring on the dam face, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, but isn't it our hope in this risk analysis that when the reservoir is that low, the surface water, the surface area of the reservoir is going to be smaller, therefore wind action would have less or a wave action would have potentially less damage than with, of course, a full reservoir or something like that. And that's kind of what's getting to this risk analysis, I would assume, is what in fact is the risk of erosion of the dam, given the limited events and the status of the reservoir at the time of those limited events.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Purcell, that's exactly right. Yep. And that's, the key reason why we're recommending this first phase of this approach, in addition to potentially being able to acquire that asset without having to spend any money on construction.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think I know the answer to it, but so this lower pool could be used to supplement what water Wyoming has to get downstream in our Colorado River compact. At Lee's Ferry, there has to be a certain amount of water that passes over that. And we've known that the reservoirs downstream from us have experienced a lot of drought, a lot more than we have in Wyoming, but this water could be used in case we have to put more water into the system so that our users in Wyoming wouldn't be restricted.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, yes, sir. That's exactly the reason for trying to make this water available.
Any other questions for Tony about the Fontanelle?
Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the Fontanelle contract with the Bureau.
Motion made by Commissioner Purcell, seconded by Commissioner Little. All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next item of business is in-stream flow.
Mr. Chairman, actually, the next two items are very similarly related. The first one is setting up an interagency agreement between the Water Development Commission and the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. This will allow the procedure for the Game and Fish Department to pay for the in-stream flow studies that we have paid in the past. This is a mechanism to transfer those monies. And then the following bullet point, the Upper Wind River in-stream flow, is an actual contract, I believe, that needs approval. So both of these are related to the same item, so I'll let Chase discuss both of these with you.
Mr. Chair, I'm Chase Tavelli. I too reside in the basement. I'm not part of dams and reservoirs, I'm part of planning, the only guy in the basement from planning. I believe it was in either 2018 or 2019, the legislature changed the in-stream flow bill so that the Game and Fish is now responsible for paying for in-stream flow studies. So as Director Gebhardt noted, this in-stream flow interagency agreement that you see here is the mechanism so that I can receive the pay request from the consultant. I review it. I send that pay request to Game and Fish. They then have 20 days to make payment to our office, and then we pay Biota, who was selected. The contract is for $64,400. It's to study 5 segments. You have previously approved the application for those in-stream flow water rights. This particular contract, we have gone through the entire selection process already. We selected Biota in October. Commissioners Lancaster and Wagner were part of that selection, and so you have this contract in front of you for your approval. I'll take any questions.
Is there any questions by the commission on this particular subject? From Chase? Or for Chase?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the contract.
Second. Been moved by Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Wagner. All those in
Chairman?
favor? Go ahead.
Clarification question, or is this motion to approve both the interagency agreement and the contract?
It was just to do the interagency agreement.
I don't believe we do, so however you want to handle it, I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Right, to clarify, we're doing both, the interagent and the other. So with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, Chase. Next item of business is, looks like Upper Wind River in-stream flows.
I did that one too.
Oh, we did that one. Okay, we got them both out, that's right. Preparation for 2020 legislature. And what I want to do is just for, I'd like to move the omnibus water bill ahead of the planning one, so we'll do the construction first. Is that okay with you? Even though I think you have time, but we'll still switch them around.
You want to make a motion to, so we can amend it?
Yeah, yeah, we want a motion that
I
we
would
can
move
do that one
we
first.
move the omnibus water planning bill under tab G.
You want to do construction though first, right?
Yeah, I want to do the construction first, Commissioner, guys.
Okay,
So we just want to switch those two around on our agenda.
you're the boss. Go ahead and do it.
H.
Yep, we'll do tab H first,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
because if we're running late with that, our leader here has a designated responsibility to be somewhere at the governor's palace, I think, this afternoon, or by 11, right? So I think we're okay, but let's make sure that we are.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director, before we start, let's go through the draft letter that you've handed out explaining the changes that were made last night. So we can then spiff it up and get it ready for our chairman's signature and put on letterhead and be ready for tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I can identify the quick changes that were made to the letter that you saw yesterday. Under bullet 2, it now reads, historically there has been, I changed the dollar amount pursuant to looking at the more detailed attachment that is now attached to this. So I added a sentence that points you to the attached history of legislative appropriations table that presents the details of the diverted amounts. And that the new total for this sheet now is 279 million. It changed from 333 in the previous letter. And the reason for that change is on the second page. We caught this late yesterday, but one of the diversions or the outgoing program appropriations that we identified was actually to seed Water Development Account 3. So that money came from us to us. So we took that out of the total number of non-program expenditures. So that change and then adding this detail is what results in this new form of the letter. And we could make any other changes that anybody would like to, or
Any
modifications.
questions by the commission? And also, we would entertain the Select Water Commission for any advice to this letter.
Mr. Chairman, I do have, what's the time frame like under water development account number 1? What is the time frame for all of those? Do you have any idea?
Mr. Chairman, it was my understanding that when we did this, we looked back through the history of the program itself. So I believe it was back to the mid-'80s, roughly 1984 to 1986. So this is a history of everything that we could find throughout the program's history.
Mr. Chairman, being the old guy, yeah, this goes all the way back to the initial Governor Herschler appropriation back in 78, 79. So this is the entire life of the program, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, is there any chance of getting dates on these? Is that, can you find those, or do you have them?
Mr. Chairman, without a fiscal manager right now, it'll take some time to try to dig that up. I don't know how long it would take, to be honest with you. I will look to see what we have, but it might be cumbersome for me.
I think that would help, if possible.
Any other questions on this particular letter?
Mr. Chairman, so just so I kind of understand what we're doing, we'll send this letter to the governor, correct? Does it start there, or appropriations? And then I
Give it to you first.
Mr. Chairman,
sure.
I think the intent of it was to present it to Select Water Committee to use to their liking.
Okay. So we have to figure that out then, what we do with it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Really, we really wanted more of a record, I guess,
Right.
at this time. We don't expect probably that 10 million to come tomorrow or the day after, but we want to just put it on record of what we think, or we could be entitled to someday as far as funds that have been diverted. And I think that's what this letter pertains to.
Mr. Chairman, the premise of this letter was a request from the November meeting by Select Water Committee. That's where this whole thing originated.
Okay.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director. I think it's a good idea to come up with the history of where we've lost money from interest on investments, and that should have gone into water development rather than other pockets. I don't know as I would expect much. Most of us have seen the budget, and it's kind of a lean rascal, regardless of investments and some income we didn't think we'd have. But I think it might curb an appetite by appropriations to take more money out of the development office. And always the construction account gets looked at as, millions and millions of dollars that ought to be free to use by other agencies. And I think by reminding them that we've had money diverted out of water development to other things might keep them from taking any more money out. I'm not sure we'll get anything back anytime soon, except maybe the 10 million. That part was, if it was can be shown that it was a direct loan, that should be paid back.
10 million? Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't know if you can charge interest on it, probably not. If it was an interest factor, I think it would double in today's world, so.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't push our luck, though, on that one.
But I think it's a good point to put it on record that that's what's happened. And it looks like maybe we didn't use it quick enough, or they wouldn't have got it, right?
Exactly.
Okay. With that, we'll
Mr. Chairman?
make sure that we keep our steamroller going here and make sure they don't get it before we use it. Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I'm just trying to figure out the math. I understand the 54 million was basically, we're not counting it because it was on page 2, because it was diverted from account 1. So we have 217,000 on account 1 on page 1. The above 198 million was incoming money, not outgoing money. And on the back page, we have a total of 39 million that looks like, or I guess maybe just 22. Is that what we're doing? I mean, I just didn't know how we got to the 279 on the front. What numbers you added?
Mr. Chairman, on those tables, the upper table are incoming appropriations,
Right.
whether that sets up the account or seed money or whatever it was. The bottom portion is any diversion and where it went to throughout the history. And I have not seen specifics as to, once it leaves here, we don't know what it's used for, but we just tried to summarize any of the diversions that we could find from the program to non-program sources, is all we've done. Does that answer your question? So, over the history of the program, this table is saying that there were 217 million of these diversions out of Water Development Account 1 to something else.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman. Follow up, Mr. Chairman. It's a mathematical question, actually, and maybe Jason has the answer for it. I see 217 on page as a diversion, but how do I get to the 279 on the front page? It says historically there's been 279 million diverted. I have 217 on the back page. I have 22 million. I have 10 million owed. I'm just not getting to 279 by adding these different figures. Jason maybe has the answer.
Mr. Chairman, there's
Oh, I missed a page.
there's
Okay.
three
I missed the
accounts
last page,
that,
sorry.
and the total of those three
Accounts.
accounts.
I got it,
equal
sorry.
the
I
279.
missed the last page.
Any other questions on our letter?
Mr. Chairman, one other kind of, you'll see on the bottom of the first table, the 54070. And then you go to the last page, when you get to account 3, you'll again see that total as incoming for account 3. So that was in fact, the change. When we wrote the letter, we talked about using the funds explicitly for other non-WWDP purposes. Well, actually, that appropriation was for WWDP purposes, so we included in the. I guess the point of the letter is to respond to a request from the Select Water Committee, and what you do with this is your business.
Oh.
So we know nothing. No, we'd be happy to help any way we can. But that was the purpose.
So with that,
If you choose to do nothing with it, that's one thing. If you choose to scatter it to the world, that's another thing, so.
in all essence, we expect a check in the mail. I'm kidding. Anyway, with that, is there any other questions on our letter to the Select Water Committee? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
To do both of them, or just?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we particularly need a motion.
We need a
I think
motion to
I
write
just
the
think
letter?
That's
this is a
information
request
for that.
Okay.
and a request for information, and we wanted the commission the opportunity to look at it before it was submitted. And we haven't heard, we've had some good discussion about it, and I think it's more of an administrative thing than necessarily a commission formal action.
Okay, there's enough information for me to sign it, so that's all that counts, right?
I don't know that much.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're into anonymous water bill construction H, is that right?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Tab H?
Mr. Chairman, before we dive into the bill, I will just point out a couple of items that may need further discussion, I'm not sure. One being, and it is on the agenda, since the November meeting, we have included the project sponsors contingency fund for account 3. That is in the bill for the $10 million we discussed yesterday. We've also included the Wind River Irrigation Rehabilitation project, and that one was a time extension only. I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
Yeah, time extension.
Then, please remind me when we get there to discuss the small water projects that we discussed yesterday of what we want to do with that. In the bill currently is what was recommended and discussed in the November meeting. So we will talk about those as we go through the bill. So going into the bill, I don't know how much detail we want to get into, but my thought was to go through in detail one project to kind of show you how the bill lays out, and then just go through the projects at a higher level following that, and then identify any special conditions that are attached to a project that would be outside the norm, if that's agreeable to the commission. So on page 2, we get into our first project on line 15. This identifies the new Title 99 number, and the first set of projects are for level 3 construction projects, new development, which is account 1. Under A, authorization is granted for level 3 new development construction projects identified in this subsection, subject to general conditions specified in Wyoming Statute 99-3-103, provided that Wyoming Statute 99-3-103A III shall not apply to the projects identified in this section unless required by Wyoming Statute 41-2-121. And I believe what this is requiring a sinking fund to be eligible for the program. That this clause eliminates the requirement for that sinking fund that was established in statute some time ago. So going into the first project then, under paragraph B, the project is the Bighorn Regional Transmission 2020 project. Project sponsor was Bighorn Regional Joint Powers Board. The project purpose, municipal and rural domestic water supply. Project description is design and construction of transmission pipelines and appurtenances necessary to make the project function in the manner intended. The total project budget, $6,510,000. Of that portion, the project grant, the state of Wyoming shall grant to the sponsor from Water Development Account 1 through the commission for the design, permit procurement, project land procurement, construction engineering, and construction of the project an amount not to exceed $4,361,700 or 67% of the actual development costs, whichever is less. Appropriation, there is an appropriation from the Water Development Account 1 to the Commission, $4,361,700, or as much thereof as necessary to carry out the purposes of this subsection. Unexpended funds appropriated under this subsection shall revert to Water Development Account 1 on July 1st, 2025. Special conditions, the sponsor is responsible for acquiring 33% of the total project budget from other sources. So much of this language, as we go through these subsequent projects, is identical, or intends to do the same thing. So I will just hit the projects, and these are the projects that were approved in November, with maybe a couple of exceptions. When we get to those, we'll talk about them. Under Tab C is the Cheyenne Transmission Pump Station and Tank 2020. Sponsor is the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. The total project budget was $12,360,000. Of that, the grant portion that we'd be providing totals $8,281,200, or 67% of the actual costs. So that is what would, the grant portion is what would be appropriated for this project. And this would be, the reversion date for this again is July 1st of 2025. The next project, cloud seeding Medicine Bow Mountains, 2020 to 2021 for the state of Wyoming. The total project budget was $750,000 with a reversion date of July 1st, 2022. This is a one-year program. The special conditions are slightly different for this. As part of the appropriation, there is an account for oversight of the program, a total of $5,000 for the Water Development Office to administer, travel, and maintain the project. Under tab B, or paragraph B, under special conditions, the Wyoming Water Development Office shall acquire funding commitments from water users or other interested parties for operational costs which exceed project appropriation. This was described yesterday by Barry, and this is our funding partners portion of the program. The Wyoming Water Development Office authorized to enter into contracts with Colorado organizations to extend aerial modification efforts into Colorado, provided these organizations pay 100% of the additional costs associated with the operations in Colorado. So we are not paying for any work done in Colorado. The next project is cloud seeding Wind River Mountains, 2020 to 2021. Again, we discussed this project yesterday as well. The total project budget for this is $530,000. The appropriation amount is for $200,000 for this program with a reversion date of 2022. Special conditions for this are similar to the previous project. We have a $5,000 oversight administration budget for the development office. The state of Wyoming shall participate at a rate up to 37% of actual project operation costs not to exceed $195,000. The remaining portion of the project is from project participants, funding partners. And that's, I explained in paragraph C, prior to commencing project operations, the Wyoming Water Development Office shall acquire funding commitments from other Colorado River Basin water users or other interested parties for a minimum of 63% of actual project operation costs. If the project is canceled, the Wyoming Water Development Office is authorized to use appropriated funds to remove weather modification equipment and reclaim project sites. Moving on to the next project is the Gillette Regional Extension Phase 5 2020 for the city of Gillette. Total project budget $4,610,000. Of that, the grant portion that we are appropriating is $88,700, or 67% of the actual costs, with the reversion date of 2025. Most of these projects in this first block, it's only a grant portion, no loan portion. Next project under G is the Glen Rock Transmission Pipeline Project 2020. Total project budget $1,430,000. The grant portion and the appropriation portion of this is $958,100, or 67% of the actual costs, with a reversion date of 2025. The next project is the Guernsey Transmission Pipeline Project. Total project cost $3,080,000. This is a grant-only project. So the grant portion and the appropriation amount is $2,063,600, or 67% of the actual costs. Next project is the and please speak up if I'm moving too fast. The next project is the Newcastle Water System Improvements 2020. Total project, $170,000. Again, this is a grant-only project. So the grant and appropriation amount for $113,900, or 67% of the actual development costs, with a reversion date of 2025. Next project is the Northwest Rural Water System Improvements 2020. Total project, $1,010,000. Again, a grant-only project. The grant amount and appropriation amount, $676,700, or 67% of actual costs, with the reversion date of 2025. Next project is the Sheridan Area Water Supply Transmission 2020. Total project cost, $4,630,000. This is a grant-only project with the grant and an appropriation amount of $3,102,100, or 67% of the actual costs, with the reversion date July 1st, 2025. Next block of projects that we move into are level 3 construction projects for rehabilitation, or WDA account 2. And most of these do contain a loan portion, so the language is slightly different, and I'll identify that. First project is the Bighorn Canal Irrigation District Wasteway Check Replacement 2020. The total project budget is $1,660,000. The grant portion in the amount of 67% of the actual costs is $1,102,200. This is also a loan component of this. The loan portion is $547,800, or 33% of the actual costs, for a term of 30 years. So the total appropriation for this project is $1,660,000, with a reversion date of July 1st, 2025. The next project is the Cottonwood Irrigation District Transmission Pipeline 2020. This total project costs $1,540,000. This is a grant loan mix. The grant portion total $1,031,800, or 67% of actual costs. The loan amount in the amount of $508,200, or 33% of the actual development costs, for a term of 40 years at 4% interest. Total appropriation, $1,540,000, with the reversion of July 1st, 2025. The next project, slightly different. This is the Deaver Irrigation District Franny Canal Drop Chute number 1, 2020. This is a materials-only project. So the project total project budget that we are funding is $299,610. The project grant is for 100% of that, which is the material costs for the project. And that is also the appropriation amount, with a reversion of July 1st, 2025. And some of the special conditions for this is the sponsor is responsible for all project costs with the exception of the purchase of project materials as supported by vendor invoices and as approved by the commission. The second special condition is the sponsor is responsible for retaining professional engineering services to design the project, compile materials and bidding documents, and monitor construction activities, including the installation of project components and the tracking of project expenditures. Take a breath here for a second, if you don't mind. I mentioned yesterday, put your track shoes on. Next project is the Dry Creek Irrigation District Transmission Pipeline Replacement Project. This is a grant loan mix. The total project budget, $1,340,000. The grant portion, $897,800, or 67% of the actual costs. The loan amount, $442,200, or 33% of the actual development costs, for a term of 20 years at 4% interest. Total appropriation, $1,340,000, with a reversion date July 1st, 2025.
Mr. Chairman, I see on this one it's a 20-year loan. Some have been 40. Is there a reason why they're different?
Mr. Chairman, I wish I knew the answer to that. I saw that also, and maybe somebody can help me explain why. I believe it's part of the vetting of the ability to pay that comes through the studies to determine what that portion is.
Mr. Chairman, on the application, there's a, how many years do you want the loan for? And so this is based on the sponsor's request. I think the maximum we can provide is a 50-year loan, and so these vary just depending on whatever the sponsor's requesting for the loan portion.
Thank you. I'll try to remember that.
Right?
Mr. Chairman, but I would point out also on the application, there's some financial information that allows the staff to decide if that term is fair, in fact, so.
Continuing on, this project and the next project we'll be discussing, if you'll remember, we had two projects that were recommended as a do not fund unless we get the Buffalo Bill transfer money. This is one of those projects, so under the special conditions, the appropriation funds for this project is contingent upon the transfer of funds to Water Development Account 2 as described in Section 3 of this Act. So that's the footnote for this project. Same applies to the next project, which is the Eden Valley Irrigation and Drainage District, Farson Lateral 2020. This is a total project budget of $3,770,000. The project grant amount is $2,262,000, and this is a 60% grant. And I believe that the remaining 40% comes from the salinity control account, I believe. So the appropriation for this is the grant amount of $2,262,000 with a reversion date of July 1st, 2025. Special conditions, the sponsor is responsible for acquiring 40% of the total project budget from other sources. The appropriation of these funds is contingent on the Buffalo Bill transfer as well as the last project. The next project on the list is the Enterprise Watershed Improvement District Canal Lining 2020. This is a total project budget of $610,000. This is a grant loan mix. Grant portion is $408,700, or 67% of actual costs. The loan amount, $201,300, or 33% of actual costs. This term for the loan is 50 years at 4% interest. So the appropriation is for the entire budget amount of $610,000 with a reversion date of July 1st, 2025. Next project is the Kirby Ditch Irrigation District Pipeline 2020. Total project budget, $2,310,000. This too is a grant loan mix. The grant portion is $1,547,700, or 67%. The loan portion is $762,300, or 33%, at a term of 4% over a 30-year term. Appropriation is for the entire budget amount of $2,310,000. Reversion date July 1st, 2025. The next project is the Laramie Valley Diversion Structure 2020. This too is a grant loan mix. Total project budget, $1,150,000. Grant portion of the project is $770,500, or 67% of the actual development costs. The loan amount in the amount of $379,500 at 4% interest for a term of 20 years. The appropriation, total amount $1,150,000. Reversion date July 1st, 2025. The next project is the Savory Little Snake River Water Conservancy District Savory Creek Diversion. This is total project budget of $450,000. The project, this is a grant-only project. A grant in the amount of $301,500, or 67% of the actual costs. So the appropriation is for the grant amount of $301,500 with a reversion date of July 1st, 2025. The next project is the Sidon Irrigation District Sidon Canal 2020. This is another materials-only project. So the request is for 100% of the materials costs, but the total project is estimated at $1,753,857,000. The project grant and the appropriation amount of $1,060,000. With the reversion date of July 1st, 2025. Some special conditions. The sponsor is responsible for all project costs with the exception of the purchase of project materials as supported by vendor invoices and as approved by the commission. The sponsor is responsible for obtaining professional engineering services to design the project, compile materials and bidding documents, and monitor construction activities, including the installation of project components and the tracking of project expenditures. Next item is the Sponsors Contingency Fund. This item in the bill establishes a Sponsors Contingency Fund for Account 3, similar to the Account 1 and 2 funds that were already been developed. And this establishes a $10 million contingency fund for Account 3. The specific language to this that's slightly different than the other contingency accounts is that the grant portion is determined not by a percentage of the project, but it's determined not to exceed the public benefits as computed by the commission. Some of our dams and reservoir projects, we have different funding scenarios, percentages between grant and loan portions. So the idea is to either mimic that percentage that's already been established in the project, or sometimes those projects are set up so that we determine the maximum ability to pay of the project sponsor. So if this contingency fund is used, it is only for the grant portion and provides no more burden on the sponsor. So that's why that language is slightly different.
Chairman, do you want to take questions as we go, or do you want to wait till the end?
I think I would entertain a question. Go ahead, Commissioner Purcell.
It's the project public benefits part that makes my eyes water. My concern is you get a situation where you have the dam half-built, and then you have a problem. And then if you come to a conclusion that solving that problem goes over the public benefits, what are you gonna do? Go tear out everything you've done? I don't know how you've thought about that in the past, but I'd like some discussion about it, because the reality of it is you could get in a situation where halfway through the job, you find a new geotechnical issue, and you've got to go back to this contingency fund to supplement the budget, and you do the calculations, and I don't know where this language came from, but the reality of it is this kind of esoteric public benefit thing drives me a little crazy.
Mr. Chairman, the language came from, I believe, the rules for account 3 and determining the grant loan portion. That was the language used in that component, and I do see your point, and I don't know what we should do to change it, but I do think it's a valid point. Jason helped put this together. Maybe he's got some comments.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe that language is in statute, that we can fund up to 100%, but not to exceed public benefit.
Aren't we, in fact, developing new statutes right now? Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
The language, I believe, comes from 41-2-121, and it talks about the criteria for evaluating projects. And it says the commission's recommendation shall, and is one of those items listed, include financing methods subject to the following. So it's subsection 2 says storage projects may be financed by grants for the full cost of the storage capacity, but not to exceed public benefits as computed by the commission.
Mr. Chairman, okay, but there might become a time where we're going to have to reassess public benefits, because there might be a great deal of public benefits by not tearing down what you already built. So I guess that will be the deliberation that will take place should we ever come into that situation. I guess we get to define public benefits, and we'll work through it that way, I guess. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? So I had some questions previously, and it was on cloud seeding. We've suddenly switched gears and we're doing it by project. Do you want me to ask those
We
questions?
can still go back.
We'll go, do you want to go back?
At the end, we will
at the
allow
end?
that to happen
All right.
also.
Thank you.
We do, because I think there's other items here that
right.
I think we need to talk about. So, yeah, we're good. We'll allow that.
No, he doesn't want to steal my question.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we are on page 43, line 11 of the bill, the Sponsors Contingency Fund. This is for account 2. If you'll recall, we made a recommendation to increase the contingency fund for account 2 by $1 million. This section of the bill does that. You'll see on line 19 and 20. Prior to this bill, there were $2 million appropriated. That does not mean that there were $2 million left in the account, but that's what was in the bill. So we've upped it $1 million based on the recommendation and approval from November. Page 44. These are amendments to existing projects, level 3 construction projects, new development. The Riverton Water Supply Project. This adds $737,000 to the grant portion of the existing project and provides a 1-year extension. So the changes highlighted and stricken throughout that accomplishes that.
Chairman?
Commissioner Purcell?
Mr. Director, on these amendments, would you just give us a one-sentence description of why the money is needed? Like, I think these are bids or high bids or whatever it is, but just kind of remind us, we've been through it, I know, but just a brief, why the additional money? And I think that'd probably be helpful for you tomorrow as well.
Apologize, I don't remember these either, so I did bring my book that I can refer to. And you might be able.
So, Mr. Chairman, on that particular project, this is a project that was, I think was around when Mr. Purcell was the director. But this particular project has incurred a time delay due to easements, and as a result of that, the project costs have gone up. It was a phased project. We had pump stations, I think tank, and then transmission pipeline, and the outstanding work that still remains is some transmission pipeline, and those costs have gone up because of the delays.
Just delays and easements is about all we need on that, but thanks, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, we might tag team these next couple items as we go through. The next project on page 46 is the Green River Rock Springs, Sweetwater County Raw Water Reservoir. This just extended the reversion date for 2 years, so it's a time extension of 2 years on this project. Would you like to hear a discussion?
Well, I understand it, but maybe others don't, that they've had delays due to.
Mr. Chairman, this is a project that has had delays. There was some issues with leakage when they filled the reservoir, and we're remediating that particular issue, and so it's just taken some additional time to get a contractor and an engineer on board to remediate those issues.
The next project is the Laramie Northside Tank. This is an extension of the contract and reversion date of 2022, and I believe that the project was held up for easements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The next project is one that I think we need to discuss a little further. This was identified yesterday in the workshop. We discussed it. This is the Small Water Development Projects 2014. I believe this is for the Water Development Account 1 Small Water Program. We had discussion yesterday of the amount of project applications we received, and we need to discuss whether we are going to leave it as it was approved in November and is in the bill, or if the desire would be to increase the funding to a level that would cover all applications. That's entirely up to the commission.
I'd recommend we leave it like it is and fund whatever we have, and then if the bottom line, there's still more, they'll have to come back or put them on the next year's agenda.
Very well, we'll leave the bill as it sits. So this, if you'll remember, in November, we added $1 million to the Water Development Account 1 Small Water Program. And that's what this does. The next project is the Small Water Program for Account 2. In November, we added $500,000. And if I understood you correctly, you would like, your desire is to leave the funding as approved in November at $500,000 increase.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what the commission thinks about this, but the reality is what would happen is if somebody on the commission wishes to increase the amount, when we're done with the bill, you can propose an amendment, and then we would vote that up or down. But if there is no proposed amendment, that would mean that it in fact stays like it is.
Thank you. And the next project is the Arapahoe Pipeline and Tank. This amendment is for a 3-year time extension. And again, I believe that this had to do with easement issues and acquiring easements.
This particular project, it was held up while the sponsor was obtaining their matching funding for the project.
Mr. Chairman, I'm about ready to ask a stupid question, so please forgive me. I'm back on small water projects for rehabilitation. I see the total project budget is 460. So so the 500 comes by 50% of that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. That's the
Okay.
way it's been written in the past, that we fund 50%. So the appropriation is for 50% of the total project.
Thank you very much.
Project on page 50, paragraph D is for Zone 2 2015, 1-year time extension. Brian, would you?
And that project again was held up by easements.
Next project, Lower Norwood Water Supply. This is a 2-year time extension.
That project, the sponsor went in a different direction with the engineer following the completion of the well, and so they hired a new engineer. That took time, and so they had to get ramped up with the project and move forward with the design and construction of the pipeline.
They did go in and drill that well deeper. Of artesian water.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. That project was originally scoped to go into the 10 Sleep Formation, and the sponsor elected to go into the Madison Formation.
So they got a lot of water.
They got more than the target yield per the bidding contract documents. So I can't tell you how much they exceeded the target yield, but they exceeded it by quite a bit.
That's just rumors out here.
Next project, page 51, under paragraph N, the Wind River Irrigation Rehabilitation 2015. This again is a 2-year extension of the reversion date. And Brian, do you remember what the reasoning was?
I believe it was just delays in construction.
Project, Sheridan Supplemental Storage Level Project. This is a 5-year extension of the reversion date. And I'll let Jason explain this. I vaguely remember, but he probably has better recollection than I do.
Mr. Chairman, this is where the city of Sheridan is trying to purchase water out of Park Reservoir on a willing seller, willing buyer basis as it becomes available. And they've purchased a little bit of water, and they've come up with some new kind of marketing outreach plans, and they're hoping to get more, so they just need more time to continue to purchase that as it becomes available.
Chairman, we now jump into level 3 construction dams and reservoirs amendments. The first one is the Alkali Creek Reservoir. This amendment adds $24 million to the grant portion of the contract. I believe, if you remember, in November we talked about as the project develops and the process for these types of projects, further investigations being done all the time, and I believe the result of this was differing geotechnical conditions and originally identified, which drove the cost up. It changed the shape of the dam some, the slopes, to account for some of that, as well as other costs that would be associated with the change of the dam profile. So that amount is $24 million. Next project is the Levitt Reservoir expansion. This was a $5 million addition to the grant. I believe the request for this amount of money was because of increased construction costs that we're seeing across the board, just making sure we have enough money to bid the project. Next project is the Lander Storage Tank and Pump Station 2019. This amendment adds $3,423,700 at a 67% grant for construction. This project went through the design component. This amendment provides funding for the construction of the project. The same holds true for the next one, which is the Wheatland Irrigation District Tunnel Dam Rehab. This adds to the original appropriation, which was for design only. It adds the total project amount, adds $5,150,000. Of that, the appropriation amount for the grant is $3,450,000. $3,450,500 for a grant, and a loan component of it for $1,699,500 at a 4% interest for a 50-year term. The next portion of the bill is the request to transfer funds from Buffalo Bill account to account 2 in the amount of $7 million. We have reached the end of the bill, and I do anticipate we've got questions, so I will turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions on the floor for all of these projects? Hopefully you all made notes and we're ready to ask. So with that, I'll open up for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, so
Senator Eklund.
backing up to the cloud seeding, I had several questions, and yeah, this has been a good program, and now that we're using airplanes, it seems to me that not only were we able to pinpoint where we're putting the silver iodide, correct? Yes. Our toxic environmental thing. That's part of what we find out when we hit the floor. We can't remember what we're doing to the environment. Anyway, it seems like the cost has gone down by the use of the airplane. Am I correct on that than when we had the stationary generators?
Mr. Chairman, Barry Lawrence, Planning Division, not in the basement. To answer your question, Representative Eklund, yeah, at that point, what you're referring to is the research program, which had a lot more involved with it. This is pure operations. The ground-based generators, as you know, in the Medicine Bow and Sierra Madres were dismantled. They were left in the Wind River Range because we had funding partners that asked us to leave them there, and they wanted to participate with us. That's the program that's continuing on in the winds. But in the Med Bows and Sierra Madres, after we finished the research, we then did a design study, to actually look at the nuts and bolts of operations, what made the most sense. Aircraft seemed to make the most sense. Obviously, you get away from a lot of the permitting requirements by doing that relative to NEPA and so forth that's invoked by siting generators on the forest. There are still permits that you have to acquire. But that having been said, basing that aircraft, and then you can move the aircraft, obviously, where the storms come in and what makes sense. It might be over the Med Bows, might be over the Sierra Madres. And this program also, if you remember, included the Laramie Range. So that was an expansion. There was another feasibility study done for that. But to answer your question, I believe so.
Follow-up. Mr. Chairman, I guess what I'm curious about is, can this plane, is it mobile enough or close enough that it could be moved over to the winds to supplement storms that were unable to generate cloud seeding in to, especially for the east side? There's argument as to whether we should be seeding the west side any more than we are. But how easy would it be to do that, or do we need legislation to even try it, or?
Mr. Chairman, excellent question, Representative Eklund. Let me tell you that obviously we have the ground-based generators there in the winds, and the question certainly has been asked, well, does it make sense to dismantle those and just use the aircraft over there too? Have it based maybe in a more centralized location so it could fly storms over there? And that's been looked at. A couple things going on. We have the University of Wyoming that, as I mentioned to you yesterday, is doing a hydrologic analysis to get us more robust numbers of what we think we're generating off those mountains and off the storms that come in. Part of that is they're actually modeling aircraft over there. That's something that wasn't done before, and that here again, that's through the water research program on campus. They're actually modeling if we were to bring aircraft over there to see. One of the things we asked them to look at was, does it make sense to go to airborne over there, dismantle the remaining generators over there? I will also tell you the other piece of this is, if you remember, right now the funding split is 63-37, the 63% from the lower basin, and we've approached the subject to them about if we were to use aircraft there instead of ground-based, would they still participate and all? And at this time, they're not willing to contribute to an aircraft program. They're not quite there yet. Comfort level, and one thing or another, liabilities and so forth. And so right now they're comfortable with ground-based. They know we're doing this. They want to see the results of our study, whether it makes sense to go from ground to aerial. But right now, on all the programs that they're contributing in the upper basin, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, they're all ground-based. That's where their comfort level is.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would encourage the people involved with the conversation with the lower basin states to make sure they understand that there are some efficiencies with the aircraft. One last question, I guess. If we were to do it, if somehow we evolved away from the ground-based generators or started using an airplane more, could we do it with one plane, both sets of range, all three sets of ranges?
Mr. Chairman, another excellent question. I will tell you that probably the premier program in the country is Idaho Power. If you were to ask me who's running the best program in the country, it's Idaho Power, bar none. And what they run is a hybrid program, use both ground-based and aircraft. Okay, that's how they do it. They actually have multiple aircraft. And so certainly a program could be devised to use probably, and you're talking about multiple ranges here, depending on opportunities, but it probably would mandate a second aircraft coming in.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the thing I would add that they may be the premier program, but we were the ones who figured out what they could do over in Idaho.
Mr. Chairman, so noted, and they've noted many times of our research and all and how it furthered what they are doing, and they're piggybacking on our efforts.
Yes, Representative, or Senator Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I'm just asking on page 6 on the cloud seeding section as well. We're appropriating, the total project budget is a $750, then on page 7, line 4, we are at $705,000. So I thought maybe that was the money that we were getting from these public-private entities, but I wrote down yesterday that it was 45,000 from Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities, 5,000 from Green River, 5,000 from Rocky Mountain Power, and 12,000 from the Fortuna Mines, which is $67,000. So, and I know we were concerned about having our private funding help Colorado, so I'm just asking how that works.
Sure, and Mr. Chairman, I probably did a horrible job yesterday explaining things. Okay, the first budget you're talking about, the 750,000 total project cost, that is for the Medbo Sierra Madre portion only. It is not the winds, okay? In the Medbo Sierra Madre portion only, we only have one funding partner. It's the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities, the 45,000, okay? The additional amount that you're speaking of is there's approximately, and going into this next year, be about 70,000 that Colorado is paying for their own operations. Okay, that's a separate piece. In the Wind River Range, obviously, and here again, I may have not done a great job of explaining this, but in the Wind River Range, you're looking at approximately, the budget we're requesting is 525,000. That's the total project budget. Here again, 63% cost share this year, going into the next year would be 330,750. That was on those recommendation sheets you saw in November. So it would be paid for by the lower basin. That's the 63,000 or 63%. The 37% that we would be requesting is 194,250. And then plus 5,000 for oversight, so you're coming in at 199,250 or 200,000 that we'd request. And if you want, Mr. Chairman, I did print out just so you can see for this year. I do have the breakout, so you can see exactly how much each of the entities has paid in. I'm happy to provide you that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, follow up on the same issue if we could.
How many?
The $5,000, Barry, how are we using the $5,000?
Mr. Chairman, actually, it's 5,000 over the two programs, 2,500, it's 5,000 for each program for oversight. A lot of that has to do with, we have to interact with all the other western states, and so there's meetings and things like that that the office have to attend. Also administering the lower basin contracts and all, there's meetings that come up for those. So there's a lot of interaction with other states on this project, and so that's how those funds are used.
Follow up again, Mr. Chairman. I think, Barry, we talked about this at one time, but Colorado's getting granted they're paying 100% of the costs. We may be asked, what's in it for the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, increasing flows throughout the basins? Is that what you're talking about, or?
Well, when it comes to Colorado, in other words, we've negotiated, we're using our plane basically to help Colorado. Granted, they're funding 100% of the expenses, but you have to administer the program. Where's the benefit to the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, that was discussed earlier on. Should Colorado be paying more for our overhead to manage that, the contract and all? It's one MOU with the Jackson County Conservancy District, but it's also a contract, part of a contract with our vendor, with Weather Modification International. That having been said, what we remember, we're working with the folks in Walden, Colorado, that additional water we put in the system, there's the upper North Platte, flows right into Wyoming to make the system whole. And that's the big takeaway, that, it's system water that we're creating.
One more follow-up. So the $5,000 isn't, tell me again why we need the five.
Mr. Chairman, to administer each of those contracts with, there's a lot of moving parts here with the other basin states and so forth, that the office has more travel and so forth associated with that than would be on a normal project, Mr. Chairman.
Why isn't it part of the original cost? Why isn't it part of the 705 or 750,000?
Mr. Chairman, it is. It's a special condition that includes that. And the recommendation sheets we had in November, it broke it out. It showed the 5,000 as part of the 750.
Just anticipate that being asked.
Understand, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, before we move from cloud seeding, a couple years ago or previously, we discussed the possibility of seeding clouds in the Laramie Range, and I'm curious where that went, or if I don't see it anywhere in here, so if you could help me.
Mr. Chairman, actually, it is in here. Matter of fact, our current contract calls for seeding of clouds above the Laramie Range. We had one flight, as I mentioned yesterday. We have had one flight over the Laramie Range. However, on December 20th, we suspended operations due to the La Perelle situation with the dam. We didn't want to exacerbate a bad situation and create additional snowpack out there with what they're dealing with. So we've suspended operations for this year above that dam. It is in, Mr. Chairman, it is in the appropriation. It's in our contract, current contract, and what we're proposing for next year, right now, is still built in to include the Laramie Range.
Well, so there's a potential for cloud seeding in other parts of the mountain that wouldn't affect the Laprelle Dam?
Mr. Chairman, the majority, we did a feasibility study there. The Desert Research Institute out of Reno, Nevada did the feasibility study there. And the most effective areas happen to be that northern portion of the range, obviously. And so just for the optics of it, Mr. Chairman, as well.
Well, is that due to the elevation of the mountains? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. The rugged relief and so forth, getting those orographic clouds, yes.
Any other questions or comments by the commission, by the select water? I just have two quick ones I wanted to talk about and mention. It appears like easements are costing us a lot of time, and of course, time in my perspective is money. And a lot of these contracts, extensions are due to easements. And I don't know if there's any thought that's ever been brought to this, and I'm sure that the one item that I'm curious about, do we allow payment within our contracts for easements?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we do pay for easements.
Is there then a set fee in which we allow for a dollar amount for an easement, per rod or per mile, or is there any consensus with that? Or do we allow any type of negotiation between the owner of the property and the administrative people that are requesting the easement?
Mr. Chairman, for the easements, what we do on the level 3 projects, they can hire an appraiser to go out and determine the fair market value of that property, or they can use the county assessor's fair market value, and then we just prorate based on the number of acres that we're looking for the construction of the project.
So we are talking about delays. So is any of these two items a long time frame in which to achieve the amount that you're going to do? That's my next question. And in some cases, some of the entities that provide easements or develop or acquire easements have a set cost. And, I don't know if that goes through the Public Service Commission or not, but it's refrained to a certain amount. They'll give you so much a rod or a width or whatever. It's a predetermined measure, and that's what it becomes. And I don't know if these easements, I can't say that we're paying a lot for some and a little for none. I don't know that. But anyway, it's a concern that I would have and I think, time is money. And I think if it's starting to cost our contracts, maybe we should look at something that would be presents to our establishment. And I know they're tough because you got a deal between two people or somebody. That's always got to be two to tangle. So I just had a question on that.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak on Riverton's behalf if it helps the commission.
Yes, I would love that. Come on up and introduce yourself.
Brian, please butt in here if you can help me anyway. But, my name is Brendan Toman, the engineer for the city of Riverton, so I appreciate the opportunity to come down and speak with you. I'll be brief. Since I am new, I've been in the position for 7 months, so this is a little bit of what I want to explain. For the city of Riverton, a lot of our cost increases come in turnover in personnel. Our public works director has been there for 3 years. Our city administrator's been there for about a year. With easements, we work with the reservation in our project. That's created a little bit of a different scenario for us. With the reservation, I believe in those easements, it's been fair market value. We just assess the fair market value. And then about on our project, a third of it runs across reservation ground. So the time frame there is a little bit different than private ground. A lot of our other projects where we've gone easements across private ground, typically many people donate even pieces of property to the city for a lot of their utility work in our area, where the reservation creates a little bit of a different dynamic there. So I hope this helps and I can answer any more questions.
It does, but do you see any of that in your dealings being time constraints? Do they actually make a difference? You know, generally speaking, before a project or while a project is in the development stage, working with it today as we do, most of that stuff is already predetermined. You know, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, and maybe what the cost allocation should be. So that's just my comment. And on easements, and I know they can be a big deal, and I know there's condemnation, and I know there's other presents that you can go through, and some of them are very costly and time-consuming. But if we have a formula that we allow, because I've seen easements cost all the way from a tap fee to $10,000, you know, for 10 rods. I mean, in the negotiating stage. So it would be nice if we could, and I don't know that we can, but if we could do a criteria that, yeah, we know what it's going to cost, and that's what we'll do. But probably can't be. But I know it delays projects.
Chairman, if I may, in our situation with owners in that area, and of course it would be a lot different and not a typical situation, you often have to go back to the owners, which may be family members, which may be about 400 even for one parcel. So so that creates a little bit of a challenge, if you will. So
We do pay for easements, correct, in our criteria. Right, Mike? Okay. I never believe her in that, but anyway, that's what it is. Thank you. Appreciate the comments. The other one I had is the Alkali Creek, the $24 additional million that goes into this project. Does that correspond with our, did we have a level 1 study on this particular project?
Mr. Chairman, Alkali Creek started as a level 1 watershed study. It was much broader at that time for the whole Norwood River drainage. We looked at a lot of different things that told us we needed to look at storage. We did have feasibility studies then after that, both a phase 1 and a phase 2, where we looked at different alternatives and then got on the ground and did some preliminary geotech investigation and environmental work, wetlands and things like that. But that was completed, I believe it was 2017, 16 or 17, and we came up with a cost estimate at that point in time. But the new cost estimate was created right before the November meeting, the one that increased the cost by $24 million.
So what basically changed? Was it conditions, I guess?
Yeah, conditions was part of it. With the final geotechnical investigation, we found a lot weaker borrow material to build the dam out of. So instead of being fairly steep sloped, it's got to be spread out quite a bit. And with that, we determined we really don't have that amount of clay material on site to borrow. So now we're going across the highway and actually putting a gravel shell on the dam instead of a clay dam, more or less. Foundation conditions were more complex than originally thought, so more seepage control issues that are going to have to be implemented. And in addition to that, the outlet works was modified just due to Board of Consultants discussion on operation and maintenance into the future and being able to meet NEPA environmental conditions that were put on us, as well as changes to how we had to armor the Anita ditch, which is a supply canal, and the cost of concrete going up with steel and labor costs and the volatility of the economy and what's that doing to the, I guess, the cost of construction. So there's a number of things. I've got a list that's about a page long.
With that said, how good was our level one study and what we paid for, I guess? Because if there's that dramatic of a change, either there was not enough investigation done at the time that the level one was done, or there has to be an impact, or we didn't pay enough money to get what we needed out of it, I guess. Somehow there's a dramatic difference, but
Mr. Chairman, I believe you're probably referring to our level 2 study. Level 1 studies are very reconnaissance type studies and dams and
level two
reservoirs.
is what
Yeah.
that's where I'm at, yeah.
And the level 2, again, we're kind of taking an approach to where we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves, hopefully, because we have to be thinking about NEPA initially. What can we actually permit? So we're looking at, I think we looked at 35 or 40 different reservoir sites in the no-wood drainage in our level 2 phase 1, which allowed us to narrow it down to about 3 sites. Unless you go out there and spend a heck of a lot of money doing geotechnical investigation in level 2, you're not going to know all these answers. So I guess we could think about how much of that investigation we want to do during level 2, but
When could I? That's been the ongoing dilemma on dam construction forever. The more holes you bore, the better your information. And then, so you go into a feasibility study and you have your geotech propose a program with the idea we're just trying to determine if it's feasible. Then all of a sudden we decide we build it, and then we need to expand those holes, and we find more information. And then, lo and behold, we get into the borrow area and dig it out, and there's more problems that surface. It's just part of the game, and the answer is you can't afford to put exploration holes 10 foot on center throughout the borrow area. I mean, it's just, so it's always interpretation, and a couple of the dams I've been involved at, some of the bigger lawsuits were about adequacy of the geotechnical report. So no, the answer to your question is the more you want to invest early on, the better your information will be, but it won't be perfect. And there's that fine line between how far you go. And I don't know what the answer is, and finer minds than I have debated it and haven't come up with a conclusion either.
Chairman, I'd only add one thing to that, and that is if you do that, you got to realize you're spending all that money before you know that you're going to get a permit.
I understand that. Okay, well, what we'll do, there's still more questions probably on the floor, but let's do a break for about 10 or 15 minutes, if that's okay. Are you okay with that? How's your time?
Mr. Chairman,
Still okay for 10? 10 minutes? I mean, people might have to go to the restroom, I don't know. 10 minutes, we'll be back here and we'll get the rest of our questions answered and get a vote. Before we go any further, I guess, if everyone wants to take a seat, I would ask Brandon, even though our documentation indicates that we have two projects contingent on the $7 million transfer, when we make our vote, should we do two based on that transfer?
Mr. Chairman, the language in here
Provides
footnotes
for that?
that and provides that
Okay.
language.
And we're good with it. Thank
No, we
you.
can pass it, and if the money doesn't come through,
Good.
nothing
It's-
happens.
Language takes care of it in the bill.
All right, good. I wondered if our language was complete in here. So back to questions on our projects. Do I hear any?
Chairman, I have a proposed amendment. My lips are moving, but Senator Moniz is really talking. First of all, on page 7 of the bill, under special conditions, 6, I propose that we delete lines 11 through 14 and renumber accordingly.
$11 through
14,
14.
Water development.
$5,000 oversight. Likewise, I guess in the same amendment, we do the same thing on page 9. Delete subsection 6A. Delete lines 7 through 10 and renumber accordingly. And Mr. Chairman, I think the purpose of the amendment is in fact, we do have authority to use project appropriations for travel. And by placing it here, it looks like we're double dipping with our travel budget versus our real budget. And it might just be easier during the session if that language isn't there, because we already have the authority to use the money for that travel. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I would move that amendment.
I'll second that.
Moved by Commissioner Purcell, seconded by Commissioner Geis, to remove the two items explained. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Checks in the mail.
No, we don't have to do that tomorrow, is that right?
That was the kind of streamlined.
That's why we got to thank you. Okay. With that, is there any other comments or,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
so I've got a,
Representative Eklund?
I have some questions on the small water project. It's been kind of a favorite, I think, by the commission as well as the legislature and Water Development Office, because you can quickly get water off the ground. Yeah, Jody might be the one that can answer. So if we start pushing projects to next year, are we going to increase the appropriation for the next round of projects, or will we just, I'm concerned we'll get a backlog of projects. I guess I'm curious how you might envision we'll handle that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, thank you for your question. That was a point of clarification that I wanted to bring up anyway. As far as I am aware, we have no mechanism for holding those applications over. And since the funding for these projects is 50% or less of the total project cost, because we do $35,000 is where we top out. Oftentimes, there's other funding partners who are participating in order to make the project solvent so it can get built. Those projects that we are unable to fund may choose to go forward or to let the project come back shovel ready with a new application. They may put the project on hold. I guess what I'm trying to say here is I don't know that we have any mechanism for holding those applications over a year. What I would anticipate instead is talking to those individual sponsors about coming back shovel-ready for next year and reapplying as a shovel-ready project in the interim between now and next year, and then leave that decision up to the project sponsors. But of course, I'm certainly willing to listen to the thoughts of the commission on those and the select water on those as well.
Mr. Chairman, I did talk to our director. I'd like, in August is our meeting where we take a tour and review criteria. And I'd like the criteria for the small water program to at least be discussed there to see if there could be some changes where we could live with it, set a budget, live within it, and keep doing the good work, but at the same time, when there's to phase in requests, and because it's, we have priorities with our other sponsors, and I'm particularly concerned this year about the $5 million out of account 2. So, Mr. Chairman, I will, for one, will not be offering an amendment to increase those amounts that were previously approved, but I would be interested in, and we will get an opportunity to review the staff recommendations as to which one get funded and so forth, and we can learn through that. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, my thoughts, and we may need to look at criteria to, rather than it being a bottomless pit, that there would be so much funds available each and every year, and you could plan accordingly. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, that's my 2 cents worth.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
I'd second that, because when you get done, we'll see how it sifts out this year. Yeah, we have a lot of them, but they might not be shovel-ready. And let's not be tying our money up.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Geis, that is a very good point, and that is the reason why we put that shovel-ready component into the criteria when we built our priority system, because it does give us an opportunity to reward those who are being diligent and putting our money to work faster. So that's a good point.
This way you'll figure out how you got a lot of applicants, and you'll figure out pretty quick how many of them sift out through the sand and are not ready to go.
That is correct, and our criteria does require that those projects that are seeking shovel-ready status be shovel-ready January 1st. And so I talked to all of the districts way back in October, as early as I could this year, to make sure that they knew that we were going to hold the line on that that January 1st deadline this year. So if it's not on my desk shovel-ready January 1st, then it won't be getting that shovel-ready designation from me this year. So that's a difficult, thing for a lot of those sponsors. But it is fair to everybody, so.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. I call the question.
Okay. I'd entertain
Well, I'll move the bill, if that's what.
We've moved the bill. We've approved an amendment. So the new motion is to, not.
As amended.
I don't even know do you need another motion to approve as amended?
I don't think so.
Because we've approved the bill, we've moved the amendments, so we'll be voting on the bill as amended.
okay, all those in favor, we have a second on that too,
Yeah,
do
I'll
we? Yep,
second
you seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we're through that.
Well, you should ask for the opposition.
All those opposed?
There.
I thought I heard a lot of ayes here.
Well, you need the opposite.
Yeah, I do.
To give you a little.
That's right. All right. So,
We on tab I?
we're on tab I, so we'll,
No, we're on tab G.
Tab G, Mr.
yeah, we
Chairman.
move back up on that one to G. Anonymous water bill. And how are we doing for time? You're okay yet for a bit? So-
Mr. Chairman, I've got a little bit of time, so one of the things that I would like to point out is a couple of items in the bill currently that need attention. One would be, I'll just bring up the LaPrelle Irrigation District project we discussed yesterday. In the bill as it sits now is the full $650,000 recommendation that we discussed yesterday. That is the way it is currently in the bill right now.
Page 5.
Thank you. The other item for discussion is the UW Water Research Program, which is on page
Yeah.
no, it's the thank you, page 3, the very top of the page. It's carryover from page 2. The commission will need to determine which of the RFPs, finalize which RFPs will be going forward in the bill. As I mentioned yesterday, the amount that I've included here, I believe, was for projects A and C. And so if you choose A and B, then we will change this price accordingly.
Recommendation yesterday was A and B.
That is not correct. The ranking provided by Mr. Kerr yesterday said the priority, the ranking was, well, I forget what project number. Mr. Kerr, would you like to?
Mr. Chairman, Greg Kerr, Director of the Office of Water Programs at the University. The recommendation by the advisory committee were projects C and D, which would be a total of $445,683.
That would make a bill change if we changed it. We have different ones in our bill, of course, today, right?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. It would be a little less than what the estimate was.
Do we have a new total that we could amend into the bill?
243.
45,683.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, yes.
5683.
You want us to move the bill as it stands right now
First of all, Mr. Chairman, I would move the bill.
Second.
Been moved and seconded by Purcell, seconded by Commissioner Geis to move the bill the way it stands. Is that correct? The way it's appropriated in our document?
Now you can amend.
Now we can amend? So if someone wants to amend?
I would move that we amend that to accept the recommendation to fund request for proposal C and D for the different total as part of that bill.
Been moved by Commissioner Eklund. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Yankee, I mean. Seconded by Commissioner Geis. So now we can vote on that. All those in, question, any question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried.
Chairman, quick question. What was the amount we just approved?
445, 682, I believe.
83, that
Okay,
is correct. 445683.
that's it. With that, we'll continue to the next item.
We gotta, go through these. Do we want, Mr. Chairman, do you want any more discussion of the bill? Or are you ready for the question?
If there's no discussion, we're ready for the question.
All those in favor?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion
Reading the
carried,
bill as amended.
as amended.
And now our director can merrily go about his business. Okay?
I second a couple of them.
Geis made the motion,
No.
or I mean, he
Mr.
seconded.
Sheridan made the motion. Not Sheridan,
Bill did.
Bill did.
and
On the amendment.
I
Yep.
second the motion on the amendment.
Everybody clear? Those mud?
Okay. Ready to move on? I'll call on our director.
Sure. The next couple of items are the bills that Select Water Committee will be discussing in more detail tomorrow. These are not our bills. I did go through these, and I'll provide you my interpretation of what I viewed these bills as, just as information to you. The first one is the in-stream flow application process under tab I. This adds a public meeting as part of the process that would be the Game and Fish's portion of the project. It adds a public meeting to the process, as well as notification to landowners, owners of water rights, and secondary permit holders. Where we get involved is on page 3 of the bill, paragraphs 10, or lines 10 through 15. It states, on receiving a recommendation from the Game and Fish Commission on the need for in-stream flows on specific segments of stream, the Water Development Commission shall review any written comments submitted and the written public meeting summary. After considering public input received, the Water Development Commission, and it changes it from shall to may. So my interpretation is that puts a decision onto the commission, the way the bill would read. That was my main takeaway from the in-stream flow. The emergency water bill.
I mean, one question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe this is more a point for the potential sponsors. I'm looking at point 4, page 4. It says during its next general session. So that means we'd only have to report it every other year. Was that your intent? You might ask that of the people tomorrow, what? Mr. Chairman, sorry, but.
That would, what it be?
Moving on, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman, is the emergency water projects account. I anticipate this to get some good discussion tomorrow in the Select Water Committee meeting. Some of the highlights that I took away in my review on start with page, kind of go backwards, but page 3, section 2, the way the bill reads now is that there is an appropriated $3 million from Water Development account number 1. So the way I interpret that the money for this emergency account would come from our account number 1. and we talked internally, we had a little bit of a question on what the line 12 shall not exceed 75% of the total emergency project costs. The remaining 25% may be funded by the commission in the form of a loan. And then going on, it says, the commission shall include any emergency water project grant or loan amount when calculating the maximum allowable grant under statute 41-121A. And I believe that it's missing in, I forget, but I believe, and we can address it tomorrow, but I believe it's missing another paragraph in this. But for subsequent water development project involving the same entity and project components. That's a little unclear to me as to what that implies or means.
I had a question, as long as we're into that section. It shows here the commission shall adopt rules providing for eligibility procedures. Have any of those been looked at what they may entail?
You pass the statute, and then they adopt the rules to match the statute.
Chairman, I would add to that could possibly take a decent amount of time to establish that and to promulgate rules and go through all the procedures to do that. So just be aware that component of the bill could take some time. It wouldn't be immediately.
I see too, because there's a lot of work left to be done with that, it appears.
Another question that I think I had on this bill is it intended that line 8 on page 2, the amount awarded under this subsection shall not exceed $3 million per fiscal biennium. My question is, are we building this account at $3 million every biennium? So is this developing it, or is it the cap at $3 million and then we replenish it? I had some uncertainty on that. And
Chairman, that's a good question. Are we setting up a revolving fund? I guess I'm looking over here for $3 million every biennium, or will there be an opportunity for increase in the budget and further discussion if we need it?
A lot of that Mr. Chairman, I think a lot of that discussion's going to come tomorrow during the discussion of the bill. We've been in contact with the governor's office, and it's a kind of a priority that he's kind of pushing. We have some other ideas. I was hoping we'd have an amendment to this bill that we have yesterday, and it didn't come. I haven't seen it yet. So I think the plan is to have an amendment to this. Some of the items on the amendment, I'm just looking at my email here. There's a CARE Act permanent land fund that is currently, the earnings are going, I think, into the general fund. I may not have that quite correct. So part of the bill would be to try to grab those earnings and put into this account that we're going to make, or to put into that account. Currently, it's about $2 million in that fund, so there isn't a whole lot of earnings there. The other thing is the commission will work on reviews of project funding eligibility. There was a question from Commissioner Purcell on maybe needing to deal with the procedures and make sure we can make them in a quicker determination. So we may need to review that also. But the commission will make a recommendation, and then we'd like to put in there, instead of just having the governor decide it, that the SLIB board as a group would decide the final decision. The other thing was the emergency funds would only apply to, somehow need to say that it's only for failure or imminent failure of infrastructure. So it's something that they should have been working on over the years, but didn't know that they had a problem. I can't kind of, like they had in Torrington. And then the other discussion, we're kind of wondering if we could get the irrigation districts to maybe even put in some money, 25 cents an acre or something yearly, to try to help build the fund. But then we get into the worry that if you put into the fund, are you automatically going to get it? We need to discuss all that. So there'll be quite a discussion tomorrow. I think the governor, I'm hearing he might be here to kind of give us his thoughts.
My understanding with some of the communications that I've had that this bill is evolving very quickly. So what we hear tomorrow may be completely different.
Mr. Chairman, I might just add that this bill's a placeholder. You've been involved in most of the discussion we have had. We want to do something, but we're not sure exactly what it is, to be honest with you. And this bill's a placeholder. There's a number of opinions out there on what we should do, and it should be a long discussion tomorrow as to where it goes. And as it goes through the process, it could be amended a number of times beyond that. So this is a placeholder. I'm sure it'll look somewhat different by the time it's done.
Mr. Chairman, I guess, so a concern I have right now, though, is input from the commission in case some of you aren't there. I guess I'd like to get opinions on whether you want to become an emergency management agency or commission as well, because that sounds like what we're reverting to. This is a big change from where we've been, and I know that it's something like this might be needed because of what happened in Goshen County this summer, but we were still able to help along that project with the system we have in place. I think this has to be rewritten in several places. It sounds like we're going to rob $3 million from ourselves every year from account one to put into this, maybe, because it says continuously in other parts of the bill, and we just have to be real clear as to what it's going to do, where the money's going to come from. I sure don't want it coming out of other projects and other things that we've done to develop an emergency management system.
I agree with that, but on the other hand, if our criteria has to be met, I see very few times, that money could sit there for a long time and never be used, is what I'm saying. It's there for a specific purpose. And I don't know if there's anything, if you look at the historical aspect of this money being used and look at it, if we had it, where would it have been used other than maybe that particular item that we had last year? So, when you put together something for forever and it happens one out of a million years, that's another thing to look at. But the other one that I had is on your criteria, if you use the slip board, and I still don't recommend going there because they have 2 meetings a year, you're too late. If you don't hit that timing, unless the 5 elected officials, get together and have a special meeting, you're so far out that your value of the time element here with the emergency is not equitable to the demand. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman.
I don't think it'd work.
This bill shouldn't even be coming to Water Development Commission. It should be going to the 5 elected officials. They have a land trust fund that they could take some of that money out of there and fund these emergencies, but leave it up to the 5 elected officials to make that emergency decision and not run it through Water Development Commission.
If that's what they want to do, I guess, I would entertain that.
That's not what we're here for. We're not voting on this because this is not even in our.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just for comment purposes. But that's what I think, our timing on this emergency is the greatest part of the bill. If it's an emergency, classified as emergency, then it should be allocated as one.
Well, Mr. Chairman, your 5 elected officials, they can make decisions that nobody else can make, and they can make them in a hurry. And they have the state trust funds and different areas to get money rather than have it run through water development. You're just earmarking this to water development project or emergencies, but they could be a fire like Australia's got that you need these emergency funds. If you're going to create it, make it broad enough so that it covers a lot of areas in emergency and not just pinpoint to whatever you're thinking in here.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just offer some comments. But originally, we talked about modeling this bill after the fire suppression account, the emergency fire suppression account. There is one where every fire district pays a certain amount into that fund. And then if they don't, the ones who don't, if they have a fire, they have to reimburse the state for their expenses. I think Larry's right on point when he said this was intended to be an emergency fund. The 5 elected officials could make that decision, but you can see what happened this last year in Goshen County. It took forever to have anything happen. The intent of this fund is for somebody to make a decision as quick as possible to help support that. The reason the bill is here is because of the aging infrastructure we have in the state and the potential for that to happen again. Granted, that money may sit there for quite a while, or you could put it into a revolving account similar to the fire suppression account. So I guess to make short order of this discussion, we're a long ways from being where we want to be with this bill to where we might end up being.
I mean, can I have a? I do not want the commission to get in the situation where we're deciding if there's an emergency or not. I like the idea of the governor doing it or someone, but, we can write criteria with somewhat, failure or imminent failure, at least put some arms around the thing. Unlike maybe some of my fellow commissioners, other than that, I think we're the agency uniquely qualified after they have said it's an emergency to help with the administration of the funds.
I like that.
My concern, and I look at Andrew, we are encumbered in our program, and this gets back to my previous discussion, we're encumbered with public meetings for our regular projects. We have a process that is sometimes a little too bureaucratic, in my opinion, but we have it and we live with it. These projects, I guess the question is, Andrew, if we promulgate rules and regulations and we are involved, can we come up with a process that is streamlined and not bound by some of the other encumbrances we have for water development projects?
Chairman, that's a good question. As far as I think it had been mentioned about meetings a little bit, the commission under the statute is supposed to meet quarterly, but as necessary also. So there's some tools to meet quickly if needed. As far as how that could be built in or a streamlined process built in, I think to the extent the statute could give a separate authority, which I think it possibly does this new bill, that would create the emergency process, gives some special authority to make rules and regulations that would probably allow the commission to make a process that would be as streamlined as necessary to carry out that statute. We'd need to definitely make sure that there aren't conflicts with other existing provisions in the statutes and that those are identified in the emergency bill. And I don't know how much that would actually be necessary or if essentially the bill kind of creates its own program. So I think there could be an allowance for the commission to be able to act quickly and to make a streamlined program for when you receive, a designation of emergency and when you meet and what you would need in order, this could be dealt with through criteria. What would the commission want to look at as far as determining funding, awarding? So I think there could be a lot of flexibility built in. Then as far as kind of on a practical side of how do you fit that into your normal process as far as knowing when funds that you anticipate are going to be coming up for the next year's cycle, where these projects would fit in for subsequent requests, how the extent they would influence your other process, that probably would just depend on a case by case of when the emergency occurs, how far in the process you are on preparing the next year's planning bills and construction bills, that sort of thing. Did that answer your question?
No, but it helped. But I have the opinion that this program, if we get involved, is a parallel program, not to be confused with new development rehabilitation and dams and reservoirs. We have to come up with a process to move fast. We can't be, let's take the example of the GID tunnel. They had already hired the consultants. They were on the ground moving. If that were our process, we would require a consultant selection. I mean, these are things that we have to make sure that we're not getting in trouble under our original statutes by being involved with a streamlined process. And that's for finer minds than I, but that's my concern. And the other comment I would have, and this might be cutting off my nose to spite my face, but the $3 million, if you would appropriate well, first of all, please, if you can, find other funds. But if you would appropriate the funds to a debt service account, that debt service account will accrue interest. So the reality is, if you put it into a debt service account, you will be, and if we don't need it, it will be building. And but first go back to, please look at other sources. But the reality of that has worked well with us for O&M on our investments for dams and reservoirs, and it might be an opportunity for you to expand your account. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think tomorrow with the amendments and a different, some added points to this bill, it'll hopefully make it a lot clearer. We'll have some input, like I said, from the governor's office. We have discussed that the SLIB process can be fast. They can call an emergency meeting. They might not get everybody there, but they'll get a quorum and they'll be able to act fast after the commission and the water development has gone through some of the criteria that you'll have to set up. But the intent is to make it quick. I think the other thing we talked about, Senator Hicks's proposal, I think, is to get the $3 million out of the general fund is what I'm thinking he's going to try, is what I've heard. So he knows we don't want to rob our accounts. So it'll be updated tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, they asked for our input. They're probably sorry they got it.
No, we're not. No. Mr. Chairman, I'm not sorry we asked for it, and I'm kind of curious if any of you are going to be here tomorrow when we do discuss it and make changes, because I think at least I'm understanding things better. Nowhere in here do I see SLIB board, but it's got to fit in there somewhere. Possibly they become the initial decision maker on the emergency funding in the first place, and then it would bypass the office as far as making that part of the decision, because I think that's huge. I tried to explain that to irrigators, that from start to finish, our projects are a dam's going to be 15, 20 years, but five years probably minimum on any of these little irrigation, not tiny ones, but
takes a while to go through the planning and there, this agency isn't used, you hit her on the head, Mr. Chairman, when you said the agency isn't used to making those snap decisions, and it had to be made in a hurry. The emergency that happened in Goshen County. I don't know whether it was the best one or not, but they have water running through the tunnel now at least.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Rodney, you had to be right in the middle of this whole thing. What's your take on this?
Mr. Chairman? I really, in my heart of hearts, feel that the governor needs to be the person who declares the emergency. And then I hope that we do not put too many restrictions on the emergency, that the emergency isn't an emergency anymore. You know, it needs to go really fast, like you guys are saying. It can't be held up. You know, it took long enough once they decided what they were going to do down there just to get the work done. I mean, when you're bringing in big equipment and all the permits you need and all the things that need to be done, you know, those are time consuming. So the emergency process has to be a fast thing. And I don't know if the SLIB board can do that, but it needs to be somebody that, I mean, any other emergency, our governor has to go to the federal government and ask for him to be declared an emergency, right? If your crops are burning up or you got a tornado or some kind of a thing. But it has to be something that can't wait that long. I mean, we have to have it done quickly. And I think if we're chosen to administer the fund, that might be all right, but I don't think we can declare the emergency, and that's just my part.
One other concern that I have is there may be criteria out there that these projects, and I know it's through the SLIB, but they have to go through DEQ. Now, I don't know if, but that's another element. So, and I know our projects all have to have DEQ sign off and approvals. Is that correct? That's how ours are. And I think anything you go through the SLIB might be the same, but I'm just mentioning that
Mr. Chairman?
as a factor, because if you got them involved also, that's another time delay. And it could be severe.
Mr. Chairman, you do recognize our director. He's flouncing around back there. I think he's trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Mr. Brandon, time to go. Good luck with your meeting. And we'll see you tomorrow. You are?
Just temporarily.
Thank you. Well, we've had Jason before, and he's got us through, so
Yeah.
we're in good hands.
Yeah, on this one.
He's got good insurance on him.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, anyway, with that, we'll
I
proceed.
would say, Mr. Chairman, one thing I did note, that when the governor smacks the gavel down on something like this, DEQ tends, he has a lot more clout with other agencies than we do. So some of that, having the man behind the decision, like Commissioner Rod was saying, that expedites a lot in the process. And so that's why I'm suggesting that he be he's the boss. I mean, and he can make things happen that we sure couldn't do.
Mr. Chairman, I think just as a opportunity to give the commission a little bit of a very brief general point to know about public meetings and sort of how fast you can meet. And I think, so I guess I'll direct this to the select water of, if you're looking at how fast can SLIB meet, I think that's a good specific question to ask LSO's legal staff, and they can pin that down, because I'm not SLIB's attorney, and so I don't know if there's specific notice meeting requirements for them. But as far as the commission, just so you know in general, I believe we're governed under the Public Open Meetings Act, And under that general process, you need to provide, you can conduct special meetings where you designate in a notice, public notice, what your items that you're going to address. And those are the only items you can address in that special meeting. You only need 8 hours of public notice prior to holding that meeting. And at that meeting, that special meeting, you can make determinations on the items that you've provided notice on. There's even though also an opportunity, if needed, for an emergency meeting where there's no public notice provided. You try to provide what you can, but you hold it immediately, and you make basically a temporary decision that must be reviewed in a publicly noticed meeting within 48 hours, excluding, I think, weekends and holidays. So you would revisit the issue and make a kind of final conclusion after public notice. But so there is generally some flexibility for the commission to act when it needs to, and I would, I guess, just advise that you can keep that in mind if, for instance, we have problems that come up on our projects or quick things that need to be made, decisions on amendments or things like that. The commission has a lot of discretion to meet fairly quickly.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have used that, in fact, on dam projects before. So, anyway, good, thank you.
I think we've digested quite a bit of this, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. Is that all right with the select water? We'll see what goes on the table.
It's in their court.
Because it might be a whole different deal for you guys tomorrow when the governor presents what he's got, so. All right, we'll move on from that. Where are we at here, Jason?
Chairman, we're under Section 8K, Tab K. Mr. Chairman, this is, just want to bring it to your attention. It's going to be discussed tomorrow at the Select Water Committee meeting. And this involves the qualification for state engineer. And you don't have this on your copy, but Brandon put it into his copy. It basically repeals a section of the existing statute for the qualifications for the state engineer. And I'll read that to you real quick. So what it's going to take out says, the state engineer shall have theoretical knowledge and practical and managerial skill and experience which fits him for the position, and shall have at least 2 years of engineering practice and experience in the state, and shall be a registered professional engineer. So I believe the intent would be to remove the requirement to be a professional engineer for state engineer qualifications.
The recommendation came from,
Chairman, I believe it's the Select Water Committee has that, put together that bill.
yes, Rod.
Might I ask why we're lowering the bar?
We-
Because I think we want top grade people to do this job, don't we?
Mr. Chairman, I think the discussion will be tomorrow, and we'll see where it came from. I think the four of us sitting here really don't know a whole lot.
Well,
Do you?
you're right, I don't know a whole lot. But I think the discussion has been the difficulty to fill a position the way the statute reads today. And the feeling, and these are not my words, but the feeling was that we could probably get just as qualified of an individual by changing that. In other words, the way it reads now, it may limit some of the folks that would be as qualified without that statute as it exists. So I don't know that it is actually lowering your standards. It might be expanding the pool, which it would be, but that's about all I can share with you, because that's about all I know about it.
That's not an item that we have to take up, that's just a discussionary letter that we look at and discussion. Is there any additional discussion other than what
It's out of our
Senator Manise, out of our ballpark? Is there no other concern? We're not lowering the bar, we're raising it, whatever. So we're on to the next item.
Chairman, very quickly, and I expect someone else will probably mention this to you tomorrow, but one thing to consider is the state engineer's role within the Board of Professional Engineers and Surveyors. There's a specific, I believe they're the chair of that board, but I think certainly a member.
and highly involved with that. So just to keep that in mind, I think under the current process. So, yeah, unrelated to this commission, though.
Would you restate what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The law, is that what you wanted?
Mr. Chairman, he's suggesting you have other statutes to look at
Oh, okay.
if you do this, and one of them is, you can't have, like, right now, he's statutorily the chairman of the group right behind you. And if he's not a PE, he can't be. So, and I would just say, being a professional engineer, this is silliness. You are reviewing the work of professional engineers throughout the state and throughout the nation. And how you can do that work as a layman, I question. But that's an editorial comment by
Go ahead.
Judas.
I would add also that if you do, you could change the state engineer to something else, administrator or something, because when you qualify, or when you look at an engineer and you do it by presence, that's what it really does mean, in my opinion. But if you say administrator of the engineering or whatever, if you're going to lessen the bar, maybe you change that name. I don't know.
Well, if you
But
just
I'm
need
just-
somebody to run the office, you could put about anybody in.
Yeah,
You can't call him state engineer.
that's what I think.
The state engineer's in the Constitution. So
It could be in the Constitution.
it is in the Constitution.
So
Mr.
change that name if you do that, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Jason, do you still have that statute in front of you? Because I kind of got something different out of it. Not altogether that we'd eliminate the engineer part, but the 2 years of practice, and there were some other things that maybe make this hard.
Repeals the entire 91901.
Okay, would you
To
repeat it?
paraphrase, Mr. Chairman, it requires that they have theoretical knowledge and practical and managerial skill and experience which fits him for the position, and at least 2 years of engineering practice and experience in the state, and shall be a registered professional engineer.
All that would be gone, Mr.
Right.
Chairman?
Correct.
So it's all gone.
Any other discussion on state engineer? That's theirs, we'll move on.
Yeah, nothing we can do about
Nope.
it anyway.
It's just discussion for tomorrow, so.
Chairman, they better get on there. The sponsors of the bill better be ready for the onslaught.
You're not looking at any of them right here.
All right, director in place, we will call on the next question.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is under tab L, and I would echo Representative Eklund's comment earlier that if any of the commissioners are interested in any of these topics, besides the planning and construction, obviously, that Select Water's going to be talking about them tomorrow, so stick around, and there's going to be time for public comment, I believe. Okay, so under tab L, this is the another Select Water Committee sponsored bill for this session. I believe it's titled permit not, well, the description is permit not required for using a de minimis amount of water. If you recall at the November meeting in Casper, I believe it was at the workshop, the Select Water Committee requested the superintendents throughout the state to attend, or the Board of Control in other words, and they discussed beaver dam analogs at length, and the size of those, and evaporation, and what that means to the system as far as use of water. So I think this bill generally reflects that. The statute 41-4-501 basically tells everybody in the state that wants to appropriate water when they need a permit. So if you turn to page 2 of that, you'll see the language that has been added, and I will just read it. The beneficial use of less than 1/2 acre foot of water through the construction of not more than 10 temporary structures within 1/4 mile of any perennial, intermittent, or ephemeral stream segment shall not require an application for the state engineer for a permit to appropriate water under this subsection. So this will be another amendment to that statute that will be considered by Select Water Committee tomorrow, and comments will be taken.
This is a note there, if you were to adopt that and what we talked about, it probably should read state engineer's office instead of the state engineer. But I mean, that criteria, I'm just saying what it may mean or what it might do if you do what you're thinking on the criteria of their qualifications, but.
You're suggesting that amended to be like that?
Well, I don't know, I'm not suggesting
we
an
can't
amendment.
hear.
I'm just saying that if you do what you talked about earlier in reducing the qualifications, then you're gonna have to change some of your criteria, like that particular one, because that's, when you point out state engineer, and we don't have one, we have something that's different than the state engineer, then it may have to read his office, state engineer's office for criteria purposes, I guess, but. So there's a lot of identification that you'll have to go through to monitor that.
Mr. Chairman, you're right. This isn't just a simple hacking out of that one statute. It creeps throughout. Throughout a lot of statutes.
Okay, any other discussion on that one? So if not, we'll move on to our director in place.
M now?
Chairman, the next item, number 9, update on level 3 construction projects under tab M, and I'll hand it over to Brian Clerkin.
Mr. Chairman, under tab M, you'll find 3 level 3 construction updates to present today. All 3 of these projects have advanced to the construction phase. The first project is the Upper Bluff System Improvements 2019 project. This project is to replace pumps in one of their pumping plants and also to construct a variable frequency drives in that pumping station. They had a bid opening on November 27th of last year. We had 2 bids were received. The range of bids ranged from $228,000 to $361,000. Engineer's estimate was $225,200, and again, the contractor amount was $228,100. The next project is the Dry Creek Irrigation District Rehabilitation 2019 project. This project is to replace 10 and 16-inch steel irrigation pipe with HDPE and PVC pipe. This project, again, is advanced to the construction phase. We had a bid opening on September 26th of 2019. 3 bids were received on that project. The bids ranged from $778,000 to $991,000. The engineer's estimate was $1,082,600. And again, the final contract amount was $777,990. The final project to report on is the Wheatland Wells 2017 project. This project was to drill 2 replacement wells to construct two new well houses and connect those 2 wells to the city's transmission pipelines. This project had 2 construction phases, and we're reporting on the second phase. The first phase was the construction of the wells, which has been completed. The second phase is to construct the pipelines and the well houses. So that particular project, we had a bid opening on November 21st of last year. We received 6 bids. The range of bids was $597,000 to $1.3 million. Engineer's estimate was $782,580. And again, the contractor's amount was $597,353. I'd stand for any questions.
Looks pretty good. good.
Brian, being we've got time, could you go over and I know where are we with the Gillette Madison? Is that still on time frame or just an update on the project, brief maybe?
Mr. Chairman, since I reported last October, I did a presentation on the Gillette Madison project. Not much has changed since that presentation. We still have two outstanding construction projects ongoing. It's connection of two wells that have been completed. That project is close to being completed. And then we have the three wells, we had three wells that we have drilled, and we're still waiting for a discharge permit from DEQ to pump test those wells. To complete the project, we still have one project we need to go out and bid, and that would be the permanent pumping equipment and electrical for the three wells that we're currently doing the construction on. And so I think in the last October, I talked about the overall budget, the numbers that we anticipated that would be reverted back to their individual accounts. That hasn't changed. The total appropriation for grant was $144 million. We had a $44 million appropriation in loan. Expenditures to date, we have about $27 million left in grant funds, and we anticipate about $10 million in expenditures remaining on that particular project at 67% grant. That's $6.7 million. So in round terms, we're looking at, again, still looking at about a $20 million reversion back into the three remaining accounts that we have open.
Is there any update on their discharge permits? I think that's holding.
You know, it was with the holidays. I haven't talked with City of Gillette for a while, but I don't. Last time I talked to them, they didn't anticipate that it would be too extended as far as to receive that discharge permit. But again, that's what they're waiting for.
Waiting on D.
Correct. And then as part of that discharge, we have to pump test those M13, 14, 15 wells. And once we get that discharge of the pump test information, that information will be used to design and size the pumping equipment for those wells. And that'll be a project that we'll bid hopefully this year.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Brian. Just on the first project, the Upper Bluff system for funding source number 2, I'm just curious what smart water is. It sounds good. I'd just like to know more about it.
Mr. Chairman, that's a federal funds and smart water program, and I'm not all that familiar with it, but it usually deals with water savings or cost savings. So if you can show that you can save, for example, electrical pumping cost, that would be eligible under the smart water program. Correct. Yeah.
We'll need an approval on these projects. Nope, we're good. So, thanks, Brian, for an update on the report.
I believe Brennan had anything to discuss unless the commission does.
Chairman, the meeting's here tomorrow at 8:30.
And that's correct. And if there's no
What I'd like to do is just get a number on who's going to attend from the commission, if we could.
Well, I'll stay till 11 o'clock.
Okay. Looks like we're going to have some 5 representatives here tomorrow, or 6, okay?
We get to sit out there.
Well, I don't know as you
I don't know why
don't
you
need
have
to.
No, they won't let
You're not
us,
supposed to
remember?
be up here today. You can sit up here tomorrow if you'd like.
Not exactly.
Want to sit in the back and poke and giggle.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question on that. I don't remember us ever splitting up like that, even at the tail end of the meetings 5, 6 years ago. Have we always done it that way? We always have, okay. I hear a nod from someone who would remember better than I. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the logic is you are in fact voting to sponsor the legislation. So you've heard from us umpteen times, but now there's no decision. We have made our decisions. You don't, other than answering your questions, we have no formal action to take. The ball's in your court as to whether you want to sponsor the omnibus bills, and we're there to answer questions. And then I guess on the other bills, if afforded the opportunity, we may mouth off at that as well. But the primary purpose of your meeting with us is you've been prepared. I mean, how many times have you gone through this? You're kind of like us. I'm sure the presentation that our director gives tomorrow will be very close to what you get today, because we're going to assume that you've sat through 4 meetings on this and are ready to move. And other than questions you've thought of since then, it should be a fairly quick presentation, I would guess.
Mr. Chairman, this is the most scrutinized budget that you'll handle in any session. We give you recommendations to you. You mark up the bill, whatever you want to do with it. Then it goes to the Joint Ag Committee, the different Ag Committees. Now I see that they're putting it down into the appropriation committees, and then it goes out on the floor. So there's no other bill that's going to come before you that's scrutinized the way this water bill is.
Yep.
I would make one comment in regards to tomorrow for the Select Water Committee. We'll have an amended bill for the few amendments that were accepted by the commission today, so we'll have new copies of that tomorrow for the Select Water Committee that we'll bring to the meeting.
With that said, I guess we have future meeting times. Do we have that in our booklet here?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, tab MC, our next meeting is going to be on March 19th and 20th, right here where we are today, which I like to refer to as the garden level rather than the basement.
Okay.
Sounds much better. But anyway, do recall or remember, I guess, for the folks that have been on the commission for a while, that's election of officers. So talk amongst yourselves and who's going to be the next chairman and vice chair and secretary
Whoever
and all
is,
that.
something I don't want to be it.
And then at that point, we'll also have planning applications in hand. As you recall, our March 1 application deadline for planning projects so we'll be sharing kind of what we have and assigning projects so we can start the next consultant selection process as far as site visits and all that stuff. And then we'll also be asking for approval for all the consultant contracts from October's interviews for planning at that meeting, as well as maybe around 119, probably fewer now, small water project applications and recommendations that you guys will consider at that meeting. So with that, I don't have any other information for you but March 19th and 20th right here.
Thank you, Jason, for filling in for Brandon.
Thank you for being our chairman for over whatever time it's been. You've done a super job.
You did. Great job. Great job. So I want to compliment you on the job you did. Anyway, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Little, that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried, and we're through today.